So German Unification Part 2. Um, so already we see how Germany is uh, it's economically unified. We already talked about that through the Zollverein. We see how it's definitely, even if it's not outright enemies with Austria following the Prussian-Danish War, it doesn't like Austria sort of meddling in the affairs of the German Confederation. So, with Schleswig-Holstein, we see that they don't want Austria in the German Confederation anymore. So in order to settle things once and for all, they need to go to war with Austria. Okay, so the Austro-Prussian War is also known as the Seven Weeks War. I didn't write there, but also sometimes it's known as the German Civil War because remember, Austria was part of the German Confederation. I think a lot of times now we think of them as two, I mean, now obviously they're two different places, but Austria was German. So, it might be called that, but probably not, probably either the Seven Weeks War or the Austro-Prussian War. Um, so one of the things that's really important, again, very realpolitik-esque, is that uh, is that Bismarck comes up with a plan before he goes to war. He really wants to make sure that Austria doesn't have any allies, and that it's not that Prussia really has allies necessarily, but it keeps all these other countries in Europe from interfering in the conflict. So what Bismarck does is he negotiates with France, with Italy, and Russia, kind of like what Cavour did. Remember how Cavour was um, kind of like when they got involved in the Crimean War, they were doing it because they hoped that they would get assistance, maybe from France eventually, in case they would go to war. Interestingly, with Austria, right? So Prussia does this as well. France actually really England is not really interested in getting involved in this war. They've kind of lost their appetite for war after the Crimean War. Russia is actually, even though Prussia kind of goes to Russia and asks for non-interference, at the same time, Russia's not really in the position to fight in a war because it was so heavily defeated during the Crimean War. And Italy actually is interested in supporting Prussia because they still need to get Venetia back from Austria. So, all these different countries are more in support of Prussia than they are of Austria, even if they don't directly get involved in ally with Prussia. So the second point here says, it's 7 weeks long. It's a very, very short conflict. And Prussia is very, very victorious. They defeat Austria very easily. So why is that? There are a few different reasons. One is just in terms of industrialization. Prussia is more industrialized, and this allows Prussia to first just mobilize an army really quickly. It has the ability to get supplies sent back and forth much more easily because it has better developed railroads. Remember that the Zollverein actually helped pay for railroads, right? It also has, I'm not big on like specific military technology, but one thing I was reading about was that Prussia had this breech loading rifle, and I guess what gave that the advantage over Austria is that this was a gun that allowed soldiers to fire 5 rounds per minute, and the equivalent Austrian gun only fired 2 to 3 rounds per minute. So basically, they were able to shoot twice as fast as the Austrians. All right. So again, industrialization as well as economic unification is really going to put Prussia ahead of Austria. Another thing is that because Prussia doesn't have the same kind of multinational empire, which Austria does have, and I'll get to that in a second, it's much more easy for Prussia to amass an army. Okay, so when Austria is trying to get soldiers together in order to fight against Prussia, or anyone for that matter, it's a little bit harder to do when you have all these different regions, when you have Bohemians, when you have Czechs, when you have Hungarians, because there might actually be some tension, some animosity with the Austrian government, right? And if you just give people from these different regions guns, then what's to stop them from actually revolting against the central government? So actually, sometimes when Austria gathers troops, they actually will station them in a place very far away from their home to prevent that kind of revolutionary movement. So it makes it much more complicated, and it makes it harder for Austria to raise an army. Also, just in terms of numbers, Prussia has almost twice as many soldiers as Austria does. So, right there, normally whichever side has more people ends up victorious, right? So, Prussia's victory, what it will do is it's going to unify much of Germany and that Klein's Deutsch plan. So, Germany is going to be unified without Austria. All right, but actually, Austria is going to be relatively generous in its peace terms with, or sorry, the other way around. Germany is going to be relatively generous with its peace terms with Austria. It does not make Austria pay any war reparations. Really, the only loss that Austria has is that it loses Venetia, and that goes to Italy. And again, that's because Italy allies with Prussia during the Austro-Prussian War, so this is a reward for Italy. All right, so at this point, after the Austro-Prussian War, you have almost all of Germany united. All right, so basically, this little blue line shows us the areas that are not yet part of the German Confederation. Okay, so at this point, you have a great amount of Germany unified. This is called the North German Confederation. So it's going to include all the German states except for Baden, which you can't see there on the map, of Bavaria, Württemberg. Um, so basically these areas further south. One of the major reasons why, you might ask, a lot of it actually goes back to religious divisions. Remember that during the Protestant Reformation, it was Protestantism spread much more rapidly in the northern areas of Germany, and the southern areas remained more heavily Catholic. Okay, and Austria still was Catholic as well. So these areas had not yet united under under Germany. So now Bismarck's main goal is to figure out how to get the rest of this part of the German Confederation to join in, become Germany, right? So what are some of what's sort of the governmental setup before we get to getting the South in? Let's think about what the North German Confederation looks like politically. All right, so basically the king, William I, is established as the president and Bismarck as his chancellor. Right, so that's not that much of a change there. They do have a parliament, right? The parliament is called the Reichstag. Um, and this is a two-house legislature, very much like the one we have. All right, so the upper house includes representatives from each state, so it's just like our Senate. And the lower house has representatives elected by universal manhood suffrage. So it's a little bit more democratic. It also allows a little bit of local government as well. So, this is interesting because to a certain extent at first, because it's somewhat democratic, this satisfies liberals, it might even satisfy radicals because, it's flirting with democracy, it's giving the people some power because they have universal manhood suffrage. But at the same time, it kind of allows Bismarck to circumvent the middle class. He's actually appealing directly to the working class, just like Napoleon III did in France, right? He's getting the masses to rally behind him by giving them the vote. And so, because of that, actually, the middle class does not have that much power. Nationalism rises increasingly among the lower classes, and they are in support of Bismarck and William. They don't really care about liberalism. They are nationalistic in a conservative way. And that's a really important thing to emphasize that you don't have to be liberal to be nationalistic anymore. All right. Another way, so because the middle class is not going to have that much power, what you're going to see is even with the parliament, um, King King William the First is going to King William the First and Bismarck are going to have virtually all control over the military and foreign policy. And one of the other ways that they satisfy the middle class at this point is they are going to get the parliament to pass an indemnity bill to approve the government spending. All right. So in other words, the parliament is still going to have some control um, over economic matters. All right. It's going to um, basically, like, it's going to have some control over the budget. Um, it's also going to instill some cooperation with parliaments in terms of budgetary matters, right? So basically, what this does is it gets the middle class to step down and accept monarchical and aristocratic supremacy. Basically, because they still get to approve the government spending, it kind of gets the liberals, the middle class, to back down and just accept uh, the monarchy's power. All right, so basically what you're going to see here is that the middle class really does not regain its influence until World War One. All right, and last but not least, let's think about how Germany completely unifies, and that is through the Franco-Prussian War. So what Bismarck wants to do is he wants to get the southern states to unify with the north. He also wants to get Alsace and Lorraine from France, and I do have a map at the bottom, but you can't see Alsace and Lorraine. Well, that is so silly. You can sort of see it down here. It's this area in yellow. But even more importantly, he needs to figure out a way to get these southern states to rally and support the North. So what better way to do that but to amass nationalism through war? All right. So let me get back to that slide. All right. So basically, the immediate cause or a pretext is an issue of succession. All right. So Spain is trying to figure out who its next king is going to be. And one of the possibilities of the next king was actually one of William I's distant relatives. So in other words, there was the possibility that Hohenzollern would be put on the throne of Spain. Now this really scared the French because, you know, they already saw that Prussia was becoming very, very powerful, and they thought, you know, that that having a Hohenzollern on Spain's throne would kind of sandwich France in between these two Hohenzollern dominated areas. They were very, very scared of this possibility. So this is going to encourage them to declare war on Germany. But before that, you have this event that I have in the notes, not here, but it's called the Ems Dispatch. Ems, E-M-S, it's a city in Germany. Basically, France sends a diplomat into Germany to ask Bismarck and the king, hey, can you guys make sure that your relative actually does not become the King of Spain? It's a very diplomatic discussion, right? But basically France is trying to prevent going to war by having a conversation with Germany first. William says no, all right? And actually the Ems dispatch was, it was sort of a rumor. It was this telegram that was sent out that boasted that Germany kicked this diplomat out of Germany, you know, basically, you know, refused his request and you know, very rudely kicked him out. So this is kind of an insult to France, and this is what prompts war, prompts France to declare war on Germany. So that's really interesting, actually, too, is that it's not, Germany wants to go to war with France, but France is actually able to use this whole Spanish succession question to convince, did I say France? I meant Germany. Germany is able to use the Spanish succession question to provoke France into declaring war. All right, so how does Germany win? All right, Germany wins partly because the southern states in Germany, they don't really like France. They definitely don't want France to defeat northern Germany, so they kind of rally through nationalism behind the northern Germans. They support them, and in 1871, because of this, the southern German states actually become part of Germany. All right. It's actually kind of scary throughout Europe how easily Prussia defeats France, so that kind of sends shockwaves through Europe. The peace treaty that results, Germany gets Alsace and Lorraine, territories that are going to keep going back and forth between France and Germany for a while. We're going to talk about that again in the World Wars. All right. This is also going to, the victory and unification in Germany is going to result in like a surge of nationalism throughout the German Empire. France is going to really be the loser here because remember, its goal ever since the 30 Years' War has been to keep Germany divided. Now Germany is one unified country, and we see how problematic that is in the world wars, right? So what we're going to see, really, the takeaway of all of this is, again, how important nationalism is as a rallying force, and also that this nationalism does not necessarily have to be liberal. Actually, what we're going to see here is that Germany, after unification, is going to be ruled, sorry I missed this last slide, by a conservative leader in William I. It becomes the most powerful state in Europe, and again, that shows us that if they're all supporting an emperor in Kaiser Wilhelm, also William I, same name, that they can be nationalistic and conservative at the same time. Okay, so that is Italian unification.